Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, AHIC. How are you today? Thank you for joining us. At last, an F&B topic on AHIC's agenda. AHIC every year somehow sneaks F&B in, right? And after all, it's a show for investors, right? Fancy deals, big announcements. And F&B is often there, but it's, from my opinion, it's not there enough. And we've heard guests say, let's hear about F&B. F&B is important to us. We've heard asset owners say F&B is important. So AHIC, delighted to see we've got this F&B crowd. 1 year ago, a gentleman called Mohammed Al-Abar stood on stage. We have leapt forward with these slides. There is something about slides. Right, this is the first slide. Mohammed Al-Abar stood on the stage and shook up AHIC. You may remember what he said. He said, hoteliers know how to do one thing, how to make beds. Now that comment from the most successful businessman in Dubai, they say, and the Middle East, a very well-respected man, shook up AHIC. And it meant it almost set the agenda for the rest of the show. So when Jennifer reached out to us, to Helen and I, and said, we'd like you to talk to AHIC, GRIF, about F&B, we thought, let's tackle that. That's the subject. That's the hot topic that needs addressing. And so you'll see this in this presentation.
A little bit about what we do, first of all. So we are a design and thinking agency specializing in food and beverage. We're based in London, in Dubai, Miami, and a small setup recently in Bangkok. And we work in a number of different F&B spaces, from coffee through to hotel F&B to pop-ups, experiential, so the whole plethora. And these are some of the brands and clients and developers that we've been working with in this space over the past, actually, 25 years as a business, and been in the UAE since 2003. Some of the projects we've been involved in from a thinking point of view, working with clients to develop their F&B mix. Most recently, one of those, we've had a couple of projects on the W Palm, which has been really exciting for us. And then moving on to design, so you can see we've got hotel, we've got all-day dinings, we've got experiential pop-ups with alcohol brands, we've got prestigious cocktail bars in the Burj Al Arab, so a real mix.
Thank you, Helen. So the hot topics on F&B, we spoke to owners and operators, and we said, okay, what are you thinking? Tell us about the relationship, the market, and how you're engaging with each other. And then we thought to ourselves, let's not just rely on what people are saying, let's run some numbers. So we then looked at the market to find out about leasing and about franchising, and some facts, because we keep hearing in the trade press, right? We keep hearing that everyone should be leasing. I Googled hotel F&B competition, I Googled that. 8 out of 10 of the first responses were negative, which surprised me a bit. Negative comments about hotel F&B. And so what we thought was, let's ask the people that are in the action, if you like, that are involved in this. We started with the owners. So I'll tell you what the owners said. Helen's going to tell you what the operators said. The first question had to be about trading. And there's no great surprises in here that it's the average check that's suffering within the business. In fact, I think you'll find from the report released by STR yesterday, it's the room rate that's suffering. So there's almost a parallel, right? Occupancy holding, but the room rate is compromised. Value is the driver for our guests, and across the market, this was kind of a barometer of the responses that we had. Now, we spoke to owners and operators that represent the vast majority of the UAE's business, and they have hotels across the Middle East as well. The first question we asked had to be that fundamental one: does your operator compete with freestanding restaurants? Because you read it in the press, right? That freestanding restaurants are so much better than the hotel F&B. So we said, okay, let's ask the owner that question. And we got a very wide range of responses. In fact, we were a bit surprised by how wide that range of responses were. Some of them said, you know what, the F&B guys in the hotels, they're just not equipped to compete, by which they meant they don't have the resources or the skill set or the budget to really compete with other restaurants, freestanding restaurants. Others described some limitations, said, yeah, the limitations are the concepts tend to be a little bit predictable. You know, the all-day dining, the Italian, the Oriental, and the bar and the lounge, cafe, a little bit predictable. The design, other than the stuff you just saw on the screen just now from Helen, a little bit military in places, a little bit uniform, if you like. The service standards, the food presentation are not as good, perhaps, as freestanding. And here's one which really stood out, was the names and the logos. We've had enough of garden views and vista and all these very predictable names. Those items were perhaps the most obvious manifestation of weakness in the hotel sector. The names and the logos were just one level below the freestanding restaurants. Hotels don't always think through on F&B, and that was an alarming comment from owners. The thinking that perhaps there was a strategy missing at property level, that they didn't think through what their F&B strategy was for the hotel. We then asked the question, a commercial question, what percentage of your assets are leased right now, and how many are you planning in the future? So this is what we read in the press, right, about leasing being the next thing. Well, here's the real story. One group, in fact more than one group, said none. I don't have any plans to lease, thank you very much. I've got a lot of confidence in my operator. They're doing a really good job. Here's some numbers, which we can't share with you. Here's some numbers. They're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Why lease? But another party, similar size, said, well, actually, about 10 to 20% is leased now, and my plan, our plan, is that 80% of, that's all, right? That's all of the venues, apart from all-day dining, will be leased if I can manage it. Whether he or she achieves that, I'm not sure. But that was quite an alarming range, if you like, of responses. And some other comments that came back. Hotel operators, you know, one thing about hotel operators, they're more mindful about the bigger asset that I've got. They're more mindful about brand standards than any tenant possibly could be. It's quite an interesting comment. And another comment, the nightclub, so easy to lease, right? One party leased the nightclub, and it ended up with security issues, access issues, and they had to fix that problem. So leasing isn't always the universal panacea. It's not always the fix, right? And that's what we concluded from that discussion. Competition evolves into marketing. We can't miss the impact that Carbone and Entertainer have had on the market. So we asked the question, okay, is your operator as good as those guys? Because they've grown hugely and made a real impact. And this was an area of main concern, a consistent main concern that surfaced. They said things like, do you know, it's nowhere close to competing. Our guys can't, they're not anywhere near as good as these guys got. And do you know what? Hotel operators might be making the same mistakes the OTAs made with rooms 10 years ago and basing it all on price. Discount, discount, discount. The voucher solution, right? And then one other quite illuminating answer said, well, actually, freestanding restaurants, they don't have the S&M, the sales and marketing resource that we have to support, so they can afford Entertainer because they actually think that I might be losing money on Entertainer. I don't know if we're making money or not. And I did quite enjoy that top comment at the top, that a worn carpet is why I'm not hitting the budget. And I don't know whether that was said. It's quite a colourful comment, but quite one that struck us. Operators, Helen.
Completely different side of the fence, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question we asked them was what percentage of your F&P portfolio would deliver an ROI if the owner invested? And the answers to that, if you can pass on. Every operator has obviously acknowledged that they would benefit from some form of investment. Up to a third would benefit, one operator said. Another one was over half. But one interesting comment which really struck us was that, you know, not sure in some cases we've ever looked at our individual businesses and our estate as an F&B portfolio. You know, you've got a rooms business and you've essentially got a restaurant business. And that really struck us as something of an opportunity to look at the entire portfolio of restaurants that you have across the estate and across a brand. And you don't always have to start again in every case. You could take an asset, you could grow it, you can get some equity in it, and you could put it in another property. And the other one that we see so often is that actually F&B revenues, renovations even, are more ad hoc than rooms. Hotels have their profit performance plans, and rooms are kind of scheduled to have renovation. You know, in an F&B business, generally the life cycle of a restaurant refurb is around 5 years, but that doesn't always seem to be the case in hotels. So you've got an asset that's very dated and is losing kind of gravitas in a very, very saturated marketplace. If the capex isn't there to completely refurbish the venue, then operators need to be looking at other ways in which they can make that relevant again. So what percentage of F&B revenue, I keep wanting to say that, renovation requests are supported by ownership? And again, really mixed on this. One operator said that they were rejected in approximately 90%, and the other end of the spectrum was they were usually approved, which posed a couple of kind of questions and observations, really. Where they are approved, the returns are now expected in a much shorter time frame. So it really makes us have to look at what the business model needs to be able to support the renovation program. You know, if the massive amount of capex traditionally you might spend on F&B outlet isn't there because you need to do it more frequently, you need to look at the business model that can be put in place to support this kind of successful relationship. And how would you describe the level of engagement by owners within the F&B business? Again, really widely apart here. So you've got some owners that we all know and we love them, and they're heavily engaged, and they sit in the lobby every day, and they've got their chair and they've got their coffee, and you know they've got a particular favourite, and they've got opinions, which are all very valid. But then you have other owners that don't necessarily care or appreciate the opportunity of F&B even now, and it's all about costs, which actually supports the KPMG we just heard about. You know, it's all about getting the house in order. It's all about cutting the costs. It's all about trying to protect the profit margin, where another way to look at it would be, right, Mr. Owner, what can we do with the operator, with the owner on board to maybe relaunch something, to reposition it, to come up with a new menu concept? There's always a way. Certainly, you know, a general consensus from operators, you know, there is a pressure from owners' reps. They have to deliver. They have a board that they need to feed into, and they do appreciate that pressure, but the operators in some cases need to be more empowered to be able to make decisions and drive things forward. Are owners asking for more leases than in the past? This is a very interesting one. One operator said that yes, in half of our new build projects, the owners are asking for one or multiple outlets to be leased. And then another big operator here, you know, currently within a big portfolio, there are 8 to 10 venues where the owner's looking for it to be leased, which is only 5% of the portfolio. So is leasing in hotel F&B exaggerated, and is it the future?
In summary, we know that business is compromised by average check, and it's become very value-driven. We talked about the limitations of the F&B marketing team. And imagine if you have a restaurant within a hotel and you're working with someone who's also marketing the rooms side. I've yet to meet a marketeer that can flex and do rooms and F&B and still call themselves a specialist in both fields. I'd love to meet one, not met one yet. Tough job, I think. But generally, there was owner confidence was a little bit inconsistent. It was mixed. Their confidence in their operator was mixed. What we did find, and Helen and I talked this through, was that there was almost a misalignment, so that the hotel operators we spoke to, their pipeline was absolute paramount. And I get that, we get that. They're publicly listed companies, growth is at the core of their reporting structure, right? And so the pipeline is what kept most of them busy. Whereas the asset guys, the owners, are more interested in right now, actually. Fix it right now, help me right now. So there was a little misalignment in that as well, just a slight misalignment. And one wonders, in all the discussions that we had, the interviews that we made, we didn't very often hear the win-win phrase. You know, with any relationship between two parties, you would hope both parties would expect the other one to gain from it as well. didn't hear it as often as we thought we would hear it. Hard data. So everything you've heard so far from Helen and I is what people think, right? So let's give you a few numbers to take home. Nowhere near as much numbers as KPMG, but some numbers, right? So this research report was done on 87 hotels in what we're broadly calling, or was called, New Dubai, okay? So everyone that we interviewed is represented in this. So it's 87 hotels and a staggering 500 plus restaurants. So the first thing we looked at were 511 F&B venues. We looked at the research in terms of how many are being leased, how many are franchised, and what has the growth been like in recent years. So there's your first answer. How many are actually leased? So out of the 87 hotels in New Dubai, about 1 in 6 of the F&B venues are leased. Roughly a bit more than I was expecting, to be honest. And if you put all-day dining as 1/6 as well of that pie, you know, that's quite a large pie. Add to that franchising. Now you've got the whole outsourcing picture, and franchising is actually lower than I thought it would be at 7%, so about half. But as a conclusion, 1 in 5, 20% of those venues are outsourced to someone else. As we speak now in Dubai, those hotels are relying on, 1 in 5 of those hotels are relying on someone else to deliver their brand image. I mean, in some cases the restaurant is divorced from the hotel and people kind of guess it's not part of the hotel. But generally they don't. They think that restaurant's being run by that hotel brand, and that has to be a consideration. Where do they come from? We want to explore where they came from. We found, and again, this surprise, we seem to be surprised a lot in this data, but we were surprised that 92% of these brands and the leases were local. How about that? You heard KPMG saying that the brands and the restaurants seen are coming from the outside. Well, actually, when someone buys a lease in a hotel, it's generally someone from around here. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. Of course, foreign ownership, etc. Who would invest in the Middle East when they expect they don't have to invest here, bizarrely. So only 8% came from the outside and bought a lease. Where the franchises come from, almost the flip of that. The vast majority, as KPMG endorsed, come from the outside. But a multiple of 10 times more franchises come internationally than leases. That's a big difference. We then looked at how they've grown. There's about 120 leased venues in New Dubai. And in the last 2 years alone, over half have popped up in the last 2 years. So something happened, right? 3-4 years ago, there was a frenzy of leasing. Leasing was in fashion, or some other business macro changed to make leasing a viable option. So they shot up in the last 2 years. It would be fascinating to see what happens the next 2 years and the next 5 years, or indeed if these guys are still there, right? They're leases. And the minute you sign that lease, the clock is ticking and they will be leaving in 3, 5, 10 years, technically, right?
And this was really interesting. We did a bit of desk research looking at TripAdvisor because we thought actually that's quite a good measure of how successful a restaurant is in terms of its, not only its operation, but in terms of its marketing. And something really interesting popped out. So if you, generally, the leased venues all have more reviews, so maybe they're better at marketing themselves as F&B businesses. And generally they have more positive reviews. So it kind of opened up a question for us. It probably isn't just about the CapEx and the concept and getting investment. It's probably also about how agile these businesses can be run, how easily they can be tweaked to suit a changing marketplace, how competitive they can be, and how aggressive they can be in their marketing, which certainly gave us food for thought.
Twice as many leased venues got positive reviews than the hotel ones. Twice as many. Okay, no surprise. But look at the other chart on the top. Twice as many got bad reviews or mixed reviews as the hotel operator, which suggests the point I made a moment ago that the leases are maybe on the way out and that tenant is beginning to lose interest or certainly exit, and therefore quality standards begin to suffer. Helen and I wish we could have put revenue up there because that would be the real measure of success of leases. we don't have that data. If we did, we couldn't share it with you. So the only place we could look, forgive us, was TripAdvisor, but fairly interesting data in there. Following us is a panel. So the people that were interviewed may or may not have been on this panel. I can't reveal that, of course. They're going to come up here, a bunch of dark suits from the dark backgrounds. I've asked them to grab a seat each. You won't believe how much fuss that created. They have to grab a seat. They have to grab their own seat and join us on stage. Thank you. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.